Welcome back everybody to the greatest place on earth. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about something that I have seen everywhere online recently and it's driving me insane. Only because this thing is the bane of my existence. I am a very cold person. I'm cold all the friggin' time and I keep getting suggestions on my TikTok and on YouTube telling me to take ice baths. Now, where do we start? First of all, for those of you who don't know, ice baths or cold water dips are a part of cryotherapy. And cryotherapy is an umbrella term. It's used to describe a number of different techniques that can be applied to our post-exercise recovery interventions. There's cold water immersion, like an ice bath, but there's also just using ice packs or ice massage. And then there's cryotherapy, which is putting yourself in a chamber that is less than 0 degrees. And there's a lot of research on how cryotherapy and the different techniques can be used to help us reduce pain, but there's a little bit less research on how it affects our recovery from sports or exercise. But lucky for you, I found some. Yeah. So let's look at what the research says. This paper found that 24 hours after the implementation of cryotherapy, there was reductions in muscle soreness and there was a restoration of muscular strength. And this was to a greater extent than the control group, which you can see right there. The researchers also paired some of the ice treatment with light shoulder exercise, and they found that that combination seems to be the winning one. When you just had the light shoulder exercise, there wasn't as much of a difference. And when you just did the ice packs on the body, there wasn't as much of a difference there as well. But combining them together allowed for greater restoration of our strengths, which means a greater bounce back to our normal levels, and it also resulted in less soreness. So that study looked at just ice packs on the body rather than fully dipping your body in cold water or ice baths. If we do look specifically at cold water immersion, this paper here put the subjects through 14 minutes in 15 degrees Celsius water. No, not for me, not for me. They found that compared to the passive recovery group, so think things like sleep, the cold water immersion group resulted in significantly improved isometric strength and dynamic power output. Yes, that is what it says right here. So we're kind of getting the general idea that it does seem to help improve our muscle strength to get it back to a baseline level, and it seems to help reduce some muscle soreness, which is great. But now let's dive a little bit deeper. Let's compare endurance performance and some of our strength and power or anaerobic sports performance. This forest plot shows how cold water immersion impacted endurance performance. And if you have a look at it, it's not super convincing data, but it does show some improvement in favor of that cold water immersion. So it shows that there was some positive improvement on performance. You can see that down the bottom because the little diamond thingy is just slightly towards that improvement side. Also, I was Googling what the name of this graph was because I forgot, and I was like, I think it's a forest plot, but I'm not sure. And it f***ing said that forest plots are AKA, also known as a blobogram. That can't be real. I have not once heard that in my life. The f*** is a blobogram? That is incredible. On my next blobogram, I'd like to show you how cold water immersion impacts sprint performance. So this is more the power side of things, not the endurance side. You can see that for the sprint performance, the data on that blobogram is much more spread out. But again, it does seem to indicate that there is some sort of positive impact on performance if we do cold water immersion or ice baths. You can see down here that the data taken from about 72 hours and 96 hours post ice bath seem to be a little bit better. What that suggests is that if you want to perform well, then maybe you shouldn't have an ice bath too close to the time that you actually need to perform. Maybe you need to have a little bit longer afterwards to recover from the ice bath. Something to consider. The final forest plot or blobogram that I have for you today is on jump performance. So again, this is very power orientated, right? Very quick, forceful movements. And again, it's not really promising data. Oh my God, look, that collar has been flicked in the whole time. Sorry. It does lean very slightly towards having a positive impact on performance, but I really would take this with a grain of salt because it's right there on that line, isn't it? Something I also wanted to mention is that there has been a bit of research comparing cold water immersion to contrast water therapy. Now, cold water is obviously things like our ice baths or like 15 degree, very cold water. And then contrast water therapy is where you jump jump from hot to cold to hot to cold. You spend like a minute in each tub and you just go back and forth for a while. And if you have a look here, the results are actually pretty similar to that cold water immersion, aren't they? What's also interesting, this nice and high point here is temperate water immersion or warm water immersion. And that actually showed that condition, the warm condition, had even more of a decrease in our muscle soreness. So maybe cold water isn't the only thing that is going to make a difference. Maybe some of the results that we're seeing from that temperate water immersion is because of the fact that they spend about 20 minutes in 40-degree water. And that causes a significant increase in blood flow. So we're really getting things moving, and that's only going to help us to reduce muscle soreness. But I mean, I could make a whole other video on thermotherapy and doing things with hot conditions, but we'll talk about that at another time. Let me know if you're interested. Drop a comment down below. So now that we've had a look at some of the research on cold water immersion or ice bath, that's a lot of like general information on whether or not they work, which it does seem to show that they do. Let's talk about how we should use ice baths. First of all, we should not use ice baths or cold water immersion immediately before we have to perform. So these researchers, Crow et al., actually found that cold water immersion resulted in a reduction in anaerobic performance, so the power-based performance, 1 hour after cryotherapy. And they measured that based on the total amount of work that you did in 30 seconds on a bike, and then also the peak power output. And that was when they had to perform pretty quickly after their ice bath. So we definitely have to have some sort of wiggle room or time to recover from the recovery, particularly if you are a strength or power sport athlete. As for what temperature we can use, generally the literature has been between about 12 to 18 degrees for cold water immersion. You can see that the 15-degree condition seems to be one of the most studied, so that could be a really good place for you to start. Anywhere between about 12 and 18 degrees, that's where you see the biggest effect sizes. And that means that's where you see the biggest difference between like the control group that does nothing and then the experimental group who would be using the ice bath. In terms of how long we should be in the ice bath or in the cold water immersion, we're gonna aim for about 12 to 20 minutes. That's what most of the research has looked at, and I think that's a really good place to start. But if you've never done it before, go even lower than that. You could start with 3 minutes because it can be quite jarring the first time you try it. You can build it up. There is no rush and no need for you to go straight to 2-degree water if you've never done anything like this before. And like I said, I do want to touch a little bit more on why we maybe should not use an ice bath or when we should probably consider something else. We would need to modify it for diabetic patients, but I'm not a medical health professional, so I'm not going to speak to how we would do that. But jumping in an ice bath can cause a lot of different things. It can cause you to hyperventilate. It can cause tachycardia. It can cause a sudden loss of consciousness, probably because of that hyperventilation. It can cause convulsions and further heart irregularities like ventricular ectopy. And that can lead to death. So there are a few health precautions that we do have to keep in mind. If you've got heart problems or anything of the sort, then you really need to speak to a medical professional before you give this a try. Another reason why you shouldn't use an ice bath is if you don't want to. I am always cold, like I said. I could personally think of nothing worse. But if you have been brave enough to try it and you feel like you're getting some benefits from it, go ahead. But what I'm trying to say is don't force yourself to use it. Cold water immersion is not the only recovery intervention that exists. There are heaps of them, and we can use them in conjunction with one another. Ice baths, despite all of the shit all over the internet, are not the best recovery intervention ever. They might be for some people, but they're not for all. So if you don't have access to ice baths because of where you live, or it's too expensive to make one, or too time consuming, breathe. It's okay. There's other stuff that we can do. Some final recommendations that I wanted to leave all of you on is that I really want you to remember that your body adapts to everything it does. That doesn't just mean it adapts to what it does in the gym, it adapts to what you do on the field or in your sport. It adapts to our recovery modalities as well. So if you do a 12-minute ice bath or at 15 degrees Celsius and you do that every week, then your body will adapt to that stress that you're putting on it. And eventually it will become less effective. So maybe you could try 10 minutes at 15 degrees and then 12 minutes at 15 degrees, then 14 and then back to 10. You've got to change up the stimulus so that your body continues to adapt and continues to get the benefit from the ice bath that you're doing. You can extend this further by saying you wouldn't do hypertrophy training all year round in the gym, right? No. So why would you do the same with your recovery? You wouldn't. You'd change it up. You change it up based on what you're doing in your season, and you change it up based on a variety of factors. Maybe it's fucking cold outside and you just want to get warm. Completely fine. Leave the ice baths for a little while, cycle them in and back out as needed. Just do not do the same thing all the time. Okay, thanks. And the final thing, I think you're kind of getting the gist of this, but when I used to coach lacrosse athletes, a bunch of them would do ice baths nearly every day until, as S&C coaches, we had to step in and be like, this is not necessarily the best thing for you. As athletes who compete in a sport that is so strength and power dominant, we don't want to be doing anything that could be potentially taking away some of that strength or power. So maybe it's best to do your ice baths once a week, not necessarily straight after training every day. You want to use it sparingly so that it has the effect that you want without compromising on your strength and power. Does that make sense? I just wanted to highlight some of that research that does give us a little bit more gray area. Ice baths are not the be all end all, like with anything. There's no one solution to all of our problems. We really will recover the best when we have a combination or we use a bunch of different tools in conjunction with each other. So if ice bath is something that you love, I want you to keep it going. But if they're not something you like, you're probably fine too. I hope you all have an amazing week ahead. And if you do an ice bath, let me know. I want to see pictures. Tag me on Instagram because I just cannot understand. You guys are legends. Too cold for me, man. Too cold. I have a blanket on my legs right now. Yeah. Have a great week, everybody. I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.